would encourage you to take the quiz before you take the exam. You might get an idea of what kind of questions you will get. Chapter 10 is actually a pretty quick chapter. We'll probably be done with it in about 2 classes. So I'm kind of thinking that we might next week actually have an opportunity to do a review session in class. But we'll kind of see how that all works. So for those of you that are Zooming in today and you're having difficulty accessing the live stream, do be aware that that YouTube link will always be available for you. And I do make the videos permanent. So you should be able to look at those anytime. If you'll notice, I did delete the video last time because I feel like we didn't really cover that much. And also, I don't necessarily need to have all of YouTube watching me have an anxiety attack. So I just wanted to let you know that. So we have an exam coming up, we have a quiz, and then your big project, so your infographic is due on the 16th. And that's going to come up a lot faster than you think. So if you're having any troubles, if you wanted me to take a look at something, I know that some of you have already reached out for questions and for feedback, and I always appreciate that. So if you need some help, definitely let me know. So now we're going to move on to talk about one of Maslow's other human needs. So we're going to talk a little bit about our need to belong. So one of the things that we find is that we are in fact social creatures. For some of us, part of the reason why the pandemic has been so difficult is because we can't relate to each other the way that we normally would. We can't see our friends the way that we normally could. I'm in a situation where my family, some of them are fighting some illnesses, including cancer, and I can't be there to help them. And so we are social creatures. Part of the reason why the pandemic has been so hard is because we've been a lot more isolated. And I will tell you, as somebody who grew up in like the 80s and the 90s without internet, I feel very grateful that at least when this happened, I'm not grateful for that, but I am grateful that we have a time where we can connect with people in a way that we really didn't before. I have a cell phone, I have Zoom, I have text, I have a lot of things that I didn't grow up with. And so there are easier ways to keep in touch with people compared to even 20 years ago. So at least there's that. But even then, like all this virtual stuff, frankly, it doesn't feel the same. Like you are all watching me on Zoom right now. I got nobody in class. And if you want proof, hey, yeah, I'm teaching to a virtual audience today. It feels kind of weird. It feels kind of weird. I'm not getting the immediate feedback of your facial expressions or anything like that. It's a little weird. We are social creatures, and even Aristotle mentioned that in ancient Greece. And one of the things that we find is that being separated from others, especially, really increases our need to belong. So here's footage from a 1999 movie, or it was either 99 or 2000. I was definitely in high school, at the upper end of high school, a movie called Castaway with Tom Hanks. He is basically trapped on an island, and it's just him, and somehow or other he manages to get his way back, but he spends many years on this island and there's nobody else there. And so what he ends up doing to basically get that social need met that he otherwise would not have is he creates a friend. He has a volleyball. It's a Wilson brand volleyball. He puts a handprint on it, makes a face, and then Wilson basically becomes his friend. Wilson is somebody that he can talk to. Now, obviously, Wilson does not talk back, but even that can provide us with a little bit of social belonging. So it's kind of clear that being social and being around people it's something that many of us want to do. Even those of you who are like hardcore introverted and you're like, I don't like anybody, I just want to stay home. Like, there are some of you who are introverts who are absolutely thriving right now because of social distancing. My partner is certainly one of these types of people. He's like, I've been waiting for this my whole life, because he works remotely. He's very, very introverted. He's very selective about who he chooses to spend his time with. And so for him, this is great. For somebody like me, who basically, if you opened up a dictionary and you looked for the textbook definition of an extrovert, you'd probably find my face. I love being around people. I love teaching. And being around people, whether it's teaching, being around my friends, being around my family, gives me so much joy and energy. And for me, I'm not going to say that I've been having a miserable time, but I've had to be creative with how I choose to get that social connection. And thankfully, I've got a family and I've got pets that can help me out with that. But in general, even the most introverted among us needed contact with other people to survive. This has evolved in us because it enabled our species survival. And so being social and being around other people and making connections with other people actually enabled our survival in 3 major ways. So first of all, social bonds help protect us against predators. That's especially true for children and for infants who could not care for themselves. Having a group of people that you traveled with, like a tribe, so to speak, also helped with procuring food, whether that was through gathering fruits or gathering plant food, or killing large sources of meat like mammoths and things like that. And then finally, so it provided protection, it helped us find food, and it helped it helped with our reproductive abilities. Hi.
I'm late.
It is okay. We've got one person here. I'm happy. I'm so happy. Okay. And it's why I'm always going to teach with a mask on, because you never know what's going to happen. So social bonds were also critical for reproduction. You can't create the next generation of your species if you aren't social and you don't have somebody to mate with. So what are the benefits of having a sense that we belong? And I'm going to go into this in more detail as I kind of read through chapter 9 and put that on SoundCloud next week. Some of the benefits of belonging: it's really nice to feel like we belong and that we are accepted. We do know that people who feel like they belong do tend to report having higher self-esteem. One of the things that we know is that it helps boost our sense of autonomy. It's kind of weird. It's only through feeling like we belong with other people and that we're accepted by other people that we feel like we can do things on our own. So only by being around people do we truly get a sense of our independence. And it also helps boost our sense of competence, the idea that we're capable of doing things. So for example, I've got a pretty good group of friends, and in a couple of weeks, I have to give a talk about something that I'm a little bit nervous about. I'm worried that it won't be well received. And so one of the things that's really nice is that I can talk to my friends and they remind me, you know, you're capable of this. You can do this. You're going to do a really good job. And if anybody has a problem with it, they'll come and talk to you. So that helps boost my sense that I can do this, that I can do these things. And it's nice to know that I've got that support backing me up. One of the things that we tend to find too, one of the major things that we see, and it's kind of clear that belonging provides us some benefit. Many of you believe in relationships strongly. And I'm saying you, but the truth of the matter is this is a human thing. Some of us value relationships, and we value relationships so much, and we value these bonds so much, that one of the ways that you can kind of see this working negatively against us is that we will continue to put time and energy into a relationship that is not working. And I'm not just talking about a romantic relationship. I am talking about things like one-sided friendships, or trying to get approval from a clique or a social group. We value those people's opinions. We value having a relationship with them, or we want to have a relationship with them. And sometimes, at the cost of our own well-being, we prioritize those relationships and trying to fix those relationships. And we don't necessarily take very good care of us. And I know that that's something that I've occasionally struggled with, where I've put time and energy into a relationship that maybe isn't really benefiting me or the other person anymore. So you can kind of sometimes see how we value it by instances where we strive to hold on to something that may not be working. One of the other things that we find is that isolation and exclusion can cause a lot of problems. And I know that this is something I struggle with as well. I was kind of a nerdy kid and really socially awkward. And so for me, it was really, really hard to make and keep friends. And there were definitely periods of my childhood where I'm pretty sure I didn't have friends, or if I did have friends, they kind of kept me at arm's length. Like, I was good enough to hang out with at school, but I didn't get invited to parties or things like that. And I remember this one time in 8th grade, a classmate had a party and basically invited everybody in the class in our grade and didn't really invite me. And I got to hear about it when I came back. So I am super duper sensitive to feeling like I'm excluded. Now, obviously, I'm in my 30s, I'm an adult, and I've kind of moved past those things, but sometimes that baggage is a little bit hard to, deal with. But one of the things that I found when I was very isolated or very excluded is I didn't really feel good about me. And sometimes when you don't really feel good about you, you find yourself in friendships or romantic relationships that are not good for you. But because you're worried that nobody else is really interested in a platonic friendship with you or a romantic relationship with you, you might find yourself in a situation where you're in this because you think it's the best you can do. This is my reminder. If you're in a friendship that is not serving you or is draining you, or if you're in a romantic relationship that you are not getting anything positive out of, or you're getting more bad than good, I promise you, there is somebody out there who wants to be your friend. There is somebody out there who wants to have a relationship with you. Don't let the stories in your head tell you that because you're alone now, that that's how it's always going to be. But we know that this exclusion can cause problems. It creates things like a depressed mood. It causes self-defeating behaviors. So I know for me, when I was younger and I wanted to make friends, I would be really over the top, and I was a little bit of what they call a try-hard. And maybe you can see some of those tendencies, but what we tend to find is for people who are isolated, what they often tend to do is reach out in a way that ultimately has the effect of pushing other people away, and thus confirming the beliefs that they have about themselves. So they engage in these self-defeating behaviors. We also know that they're more likely to commit acts of aggression against others. So when groups of students are made to believe that other people don't want to work with them on a project, they are more likely to blast other people with an obnoxious burst of white noise. Kind of sounds like TV static, like it's a terrible sound. I hate it. But they are more likely to blast people with white noise, and for a longer period of time. Okay. So I kind of realized that Facebook is kind of the old technology. Facebook kind of changed when they took everybody. Like, this is my hot take. Facebook got a lot worse when everybody was allowed to join. I remember when Facebook started and it was only for college students. And at least for the first 2 years, nobody really cared about it. And then all of a sudden in like 2005, 2006, it blew up. And then they let anybody come in. and now you discover your parents, your grandparents, your aunts and your uncles, you're like, this is new information that I've just learned about you that I don't want to know. And in my generation, we kind of came up with the internet. So it's kind of like, we know that what goes on the internet stays forever. So I know that most of y'all don't do Facebook. Where do you do most of your social media-ing, if you do it at all? Do y'all do like Instagram?
Does Pinterest even count?
Pinterest kind of counts. TikTok, Yik Yak. Not everybody uses Yik Yak. Snapchat, Instagram. Yeah, that's what I kind of figured.
I just kind of lurk on everything.
I lurk too. I post on Instagram stories and I post a lot of pictures of my dog, and that's about it. But mostly on my Instagram stories, so you can find like, if there's a vegan recipe I like, I'll save it. If it's me and my dog, I'll save it. If I'm working out, I'll save it.
My Pinterest recipe board literally has like 1,000 things.
My Pinterest basically exists for Stitch Fix. That's pretty much Stitch Fix clothes. That's pretty much it. So one of the things that's been really cool about social media, at least, is that you can actually stay in touch with people in a way that you really couldn't before. So kind of to put this into perspective, so about almost 10 years ago, so basically by next spring, it will technically be my 20th high school reunion. But almost 10 years ago, I went to my 10-year high school reunion. And what's kind of weird is that Facebook has really changed that. So previously, like when my dad went to his 20th high school reunion, there was no social media. Generally, if people moved around, if people had changes in their lives, there was no way to really know. So when you went to the reunion, it was like a huge surprise about who had changed, who had done this, who had done that. By the time that I went to my 10-year high school reunion, everybody already knew everything because, well, everybody posted everything on Facebook. So social media can be really beneficial. It can help us fill in social voids. So if you are somebody who grows up in a really small town like Nevada, and you're into really niche interests that other people don't have, like if you're really into anime and not a lot of people in town are interested in anime, or if you are, for example, if you grow up in a small town and you're basically LGBTQ, and you don't really know a lot of people in town who are also LGBTQ, the internet has been a wonderful way to get in touch with people who are like you that may not necessarily live in town. The internet's given us a way to date people and meet people in a way that we never could have before. And it can help us keep in touch. The problem is, I don't know about you, but I've tended to find that when I rely more on these social forms of communication, I kind of slack off on upkeep offline. So for example, if I'm using Facebook to talk to my sister, or if I'm using Instagram to talk to my nieces, that's time I could have spent talking to them on the phone, which we have always had, at least for the past 100 years. That's time I could have spent with them on the phone. How many of you don't even remember anybody's birthdays anymore, but you thankfully have Facebook to tell you everybody's birthday? Yeah. So you can kind of see how our relationships with people can suffer if, and also I'd say that at least on Facebook, the kind of communication that you get is really shallow. So it's like, happy birthday, it's not a handwritten card, you just post on their wall, happy birthday. If they post something that you like, you add the little icon. Now we have the care icon, which kind of looks like a hug. I don't hate it, but it's all very shallow, very, very surface. One of the other things that we find with social networking is, and the internet in general, it has this really powerful anonymizing effect. You can say, there are things that people will say on the internet that they would never say in person. So we feel less inhibited because the internet feels a lot more anonymous. And I can promise you, it's not that anonymous. That's especially true if your name is tied to things like it is on Facebook. Additionally, we do know that this can actually keep attention focused on us and not other people and not the world around us. So something that started becoming a lot more common is something called Facebook envy, or like social media envy. People post these awesome things about their lives, and you're sitting there like, well, another friend got married, another friend had a child. What have I done with my life? And it kind of feels like your life in comparison doesn't stack up to theirs. That, first of all, keeps you focused on you and what you're lacking. And if you spend a lot of time focusing on what you're lacking, you're not going to be very happy. The other thing that I'd like to remind you is that even with Instagram and Snapchat, you are looking generally. I know that there are people who let it all hang out and tell you everything they're feeling, but generally, when you're on social media, go in with the idea that you are looking at the highlights of people's lives. You are not seeing the day-to-day. My sister will post a great picture with the dog or with her kids, but she doesn't spend a lot of time posting about the hard days she works as a case manager. So people tend to show you the best part of their lives on social media. They tend to not show you the bad parts or the boring parts. And I would also encourage us, social media gets you thinking about you, and it keeps you from thinking about other people and things that you could do to potentially make the world a better place. Okay. So now we're going to shift gears. So I find it kind of weird that we spend a lot of time talking about motivation, and then all of a sudden we move into emotion. So we have to talk about emotions. So normally what I would have people do at this point is act emotions out. And I can't really do that with a mask on. So here's what I'd kind of like us to do, and we can see if we can do this. If anybody would like to, what I'd like you to do is, let me see. Oh, here we go. So here's what I would kind of like us to do. So I'm going to go ahead and stop share for a second. Now I'm going to unpin myself. So for those who would like to show their face just for a second, and we won't judge, just show your face for a second and show me an emotion, and I'll try to guess what it is. Can you do that? If anybody wants to try, show me now. Oh. Okay. Okay, so I've got Thalia, she looks sad. Am I correct? Yep, I did good. Okay, let me see if I can find anybody else. Nobody yet. Oh, D. Are you in the library? Nice. Okay, let me see it.
Because when I was in RBAC, it kept saying my internet was unstable. So I'm trying in the
That
math lab
happens
today.
all the time. And then all of a sudden it kind of rapidly speeds up and you're like, what?
Well, it's weird because I have a class on Zoom right before yours and it works fine. And then as soon as I go to yours, it's like, oh, unstable. So I'm like,
Zoom hates Dr. Gilchrist. That's what it is. Zoom doesn't like me. All right.
Hi. Is that Sophie?
Okay. All right. Let's see an emotion. You're happy? Okay, thanks. All right, you can turn your camera off. Anybody else? Yeah, I was gotta say, one of the bad things about the masks is they're not very good with the eyes. Like here, I'll try to show you my scared face. Let me see if I can do it. Pin video. Actually, that's pretty good for a scared face. Check that out. Look, you can see like the eyebrows go up, the eyes get really wide. Here's angry, and I'm not going to do a very good job because I basically look like angry Kermit the Frog, where I do like the little squished, like me. See, that's not a face that says angry. That's a face that says, I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed. Which is actually a pretty common thing for me to say. I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed. So that's okay if you didn't want to share, but one of the things that's really great about our faces is that they do a wonderful job telling other people around us how we are feeling. So for example, I smile so much, and I know you can't tell because I'm wearing a mask, but I smile so much that people, if I'm not smiling, people go, "What's wrong?" And I'm like, this is just my neutral face. My brother says that your eyes tell your emotions more than anything else. He had to always show emotions when he modeled. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's one of the things that we're going to kind of see, like your eyes are kind of the biggest thing. And then also your eyebrows, they're going to be very big clues as well. And then to a lesser extent, your nose and your mouth. So let's talk about some theories of emotion. So I know when we talk about emotions, we tend to focus on our feelings, but emotion is actually much, much more than a feeling. Feelings are part of it, but they're not the whole story. So let's go through a few different components of an emotion. So let's say that we go through the time change, and on Monday night, you catch me out by the library, and you see me kind of walking like this. So odds are pretty good. You probably thought I was scared by something. Now, when you see that, you can clearly see that my pace is fast, my eyes are wide, and I'm clearly behaving in a way that I want to get out of this area as quickly as possible. But from my perspective, here's what's going on inside. I am feeling an emotion, and it is an entire response of the organism. So it's made up of 3 different components. First, it's made up of physiological arousal. So when I'm scared, I can feel my heart beating faster, my pulse quickens. You'll see expressive behavior, so my pace will get faster. If I'm sad, I might be crying. If I'm happy, I might be bouncing. So you see these expressive behaviors, and then you have the conscious experience, what we tend to think of as our feelings. So that could be things like, oh my gosh, I got to get out of here, or I'm really scared. This is really scary. So an emotion is made up of arousal, behavior, and our conscious experience. And now I will have some cherry bubbly. Y'all missed it. I opened it up right before class and it just went everywhere. It's sparkling water. It'll dry. It's not like it's soda and will make everything sticky. Okay, so this was one of the big questions for psychologists for the longest time. What comes first? The arousal, so your biological, physiological actions, or your emotional experience. So let's take a quick poll, and let me see if I can actually set up a poll. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how. Let me see. Annotate. Yeah, I don't know how to do a poll. I'll have to learn that another time. But go ahead in the chat and answer me this. Which of these options sounds correct to you? Do you think that we cry because we're sad? Or are we sad because we cry? So when I say, do we cry because we're sad? Do we feel sad and that makes us cry? So that's the first option. Our second option is, are we sad because we cry? So does the actual physical act of crying make us sadder? So does crying make us sad, or does sadness make us cry? Let me go ahead and see what you got in the chat. We cry because we're sad. I think we cry because we're sad. Molly says feel sad, then cry. So most of you are thinking that the emotion causes the physiological behavior. We cry because we're sad. I think we cry because we're sad. Okay, Sophie, what do you think? Do we cry because we are sad, or do we become sad because we cry?
Probably the second one.
You're okay. We got a renegade, folks. We got one person who believes that we are sad because we cry.
Because you can cry when you're happy.
True, you can, but, and that is true. And one of the things that we'll talk about is that physiological experience can be very similar across types of emotions. So most of you are saying we cry because we are sad. So here's the common sense view, and that's the view that all of you are taking. When you become happy, your heart beats faster. When you're scared, your heart beats faster. When you're sad, you cry. So the conscious awareness comes first. You have the feeling, and then you get the physiological response. That is the common sense view. So for example, let's imagine that there's a tiger here in 109 RVAC. Sophie and I are probably about to be dead. So the perception is that we have a stimulus in here that is dangerous. The common sense view is that I feel fear and then my heart starts to pound. So the emotion causes the arousal. This is the view that we tend to take. Crying helps the sadness go away, in my opinion. It's a release. Absolutely. There's kind of a song that I had to sing. It came from the 1970s that said, "It's okay to cry. Crying takes the sadness out of you. It's okay to cry. It might make you feel better." I had to sing that in elementary school for some reason. I don't know why. So we think that this is how it works. Does anybody need some more time here? So here's what's really interesting. The first theory of emotion didn't actually work that way. The James Lang theory was developed not only by William James, but another researcher named Lang. And William James believed that the physiological activity comes before our emotional experience. So typically, if I'm angry, I tend to feel it as kind of a burning sensation or a tight sensation in my chest. So the idea here being, oh, let me see what we got on the chat. Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry, Dee. Oh, and you totally put it on the Discord too. Dr. Gilchrist needs to pay better attention. That's what she gets for singing dorky songs about how it's okay to cry. It is okay to cry, but that song is dorky. Let me know when you're good, Dee. Trade Winds Island Resorts on St. Pete's Beach. I've been there. I think I know whose pen this is. Oh. Okay, thanks. All right, so the James Lang theory actually works in reverse. We first feel the arousal and then we interpret that as an emotion. So if I'm angry, I'm going to feel the tightness in my chest, and then I'm going to go, oh, I must be angry, or oh, I'm so angry. So the physiological activity comes before our emotional experience. So for those of you who said that we cry because we're sad, William James actually believed that the physical act of crying is what made you sad. So here's kind of an example, and we're going to go back to this example for each of the 3 different theories of emotion we're going to talk about. And hey, Dr. Gilchrist wants to give you a heads up. I do a short answer question on this. Make sure you know at least 2 of these really well, okay? It's a hint. It's going to be a short answer question, I promise. So I want you to imagine that you're driving on Highway 54. And for those of you who haven't driven on Highway 54, it's a 1-lane highway in both directions. It's not very well lit. This time of year, deer are kind of running around, so you have to be careful. So let's imagine that it's late at night, you're driving on Highway 54 by yourself, and you basically see a car basically coming into your lane. It's kind of driving erratically, and it's coming in your direction. And so the James Lang theory basically says that what will happen is that your heart will pound, you'll feel the physiological arousal, and then that directly produces the emotion of fear. Now, I cannot do this for you right now because I have a mask on. But one of the ways that we can kind of test this idea, and William James actually thought if you were in a bad mood, smiling would make you feel better. And this leads to an idea called the facial feedback effect. So you can do this at home or in your dorm with a pencil. So I obviously won't do this with this pencil because it belongs to somebody else, and I think I know who. But if you held the pencil between your teeth, it would basically make a face that looks kind of like a smile. And occasionally people find evidence that smiling makes you find funny things even funnier than they normally are. On the other hand, if you have to hold a pencil between your nose and your upper lip, which creates a frown, we tend to find you don't like the funny things as much. Now, the facial feedback effect is really hard to replicate. Not everybody gets it. And when I read through this in the book, if it is mentioned in your textbook, I will say this doesn't replicate as well as you think it does. And at least when I've tried it in class, pre-pandemic, it never really seemed to work, probably because I showed videos of like Minions and weird commercials that I find funny, but I don't think y'all find funny. So it could just be that it didn't work. But James believed that if you wanted to feel better, all you had to do was smile. And at some point, the act of smiling would make you feel happier. Here's kind of the problem with the James Lang theory, though. So can somebody tell me the different types of physiological reactions you get when you're scared? Can somebody tell me the reactions you get when you're scared? You can either tell me in the chat or on the Discord. So what happens when you're scared? What kind of bodily sensations do you feel when you're scared? Sweaty palms, okay. Anybody else? My body goes numb, okay. I know my heart rate goes up, kind of part of the fun of having anxiety. Shaky arms and legs. Now here's my question for everybody that mentioned those symptoms. Do you feel that when you're surprised? Do you feel that when you're around somebody that you like? Because I know my stomach kind of flip-flops when I'm scared. My stomach also flip-flops when I'm around somebody that I have a crush on, or at least I used to. My heart pounds when I'm scared. My heart pounds when I'm surprised. So here's kind of my point. A lot of the bodily arousal that we experience is really similar across different types of emotions. So sometimes when I'm disgusted with something, I feel a little sick. Sometimes when I see somebody I like, I feel a little sick. So you kind of get my point. These bodily symptoms are so similar to each other. How on earth do we possibly distinguish what emotion they are? So this led to the development of the next theory of emotion developed by Walter Cannon and Philip Bard. They believed that both the arousal and the emotion take place simultaneously. So if we have our oncoming car on Highway 54, you are going to experience the arousal and the emotion of fear simultaneously. And the reason that Cannon and Bard believed that it happened this way is because our bodily responses are far too similar across different types of emotions, and they're too slow to cause emotions. So Cannon and Bard argued that they are separate from each other. This lecture was brought to you today by Bubbly. Okay, let me see. So then the James Lange theory argued that these emotions are not separate. The James Lange theory argues that arousal causes emotion. They're not separate from each other. One directly causes the other one. The Cannon-Bard theory says that these do not cause each other. They are separate from each other and they occur simultaneously. So in this instance, one does not cause the other. Does that help? All right, so we have these two competing theories. How do we figure out which one is correct? One of the things that we can actually do that's pretty ingenious is look at people that have spinal cord injuries, and here's why. If we look at people that have spinal cord injuries, so if the kind of bodily sensations that you feel will be damaged if you have certain types of spinal cord injury. So if you have a lower spinal cord injury, you're probably not going to be able to feel any sort of sensations or physiological arousal kind of from the waist down. You're still going to be pretty good with anything from the waist up or in the face. Now, on the other hand, if you have a higher spinal cord injury, such as to the cervical spine or right at the where the spinal cord originates with the brainstem, you are not going to be able to feel any physiological sensation from the neck down, but you will still be able to engage in physiological arousal of the face. So here's what's kind of interesting. How do we tell these apart? If your brain could not sense the arousal, Cannon-Bard believed that normal emotions would still be experienced. If your brain doesn't sense the arousal because they're separate from each other, you can still feel the emotion. James Lange believes that the James Lange theory forwards that arousal directly causes emotion. So if your brain can't sense the arousal, the emotions would be less intense. So you can test this with people that have lower spinal cord injuries versus higher spinal cord injuries. So for somebody, so when we talk about the let me see what we got. Yeah. I can't wait until I start crying. Yeah, I mean, let's be clear. If you want to cry, go ahead and cry. Emotions generally do not do very well when you try to tamp them down. Just to kind of give you a personal example, when I tamp down different emotions that I'm feeling, you know what happens? Panic attacks. And so generally for me, bottling them in is not helpful. Don't be afraid to feel what you feel. Just don't hurt anybody in the process if you can possibly avoid it. So to get back to this idea though, so let's take an emotion like anger. Now for me and for a lot of other people, anger may feel like some tightness or heat in the chest, like maybe a burning kind of sensation even. Anger has a lot of heat to it. So for somebody with a lower spinal cord injury, remember that they're going to be able to process anything from the waist up. So they can still sense that arousal. Now, somebody with a higher spinal cord injury, like here at the neck, is not going to be able to feel anything from the neck down. So they're not going to feel that bodily arousal that's associated with anger. What's really interesting is that when you ask the people with the lower spinal cord injuries versus the higher spinal cord injuries, how they're feeling in terms of anger, most people with a higher spinal cord injury tend to report that their anger has a lot less heat to it. They don't get angry the way they used to, and that could be because they're not sensing that bodily arousal. Now, for people with lower spinal cord injuries who still can feel that tension and tightness in their chest, their anger levels are normal. And interestingly enough, both of these groups of people still experience sadness. Why? Because most of the physiological arousal associated with sadness is crying, and that happens from the neck up. And both people with lower spinal cord injuries and higher spinal cord injuries can report feeling those feelings, and there's no loss in how much emotion they feel. So this seems to provide a lot of support for the James Lange theory. Physiological arousal does seem to cause our emotional experience. And that actually kind of happened to me on Wednesday. So the weather's been kind of all over the place, and my ears have been a little unsettled. I have sinus issues. And what ended up happening is that when I was here in front of you, I was feeling those sensations from my ears, and I interpreted those as anxiety, because my anxiety and my panic attacks look very similar. And because I misinterpreted that, I freaked out, and I ended up making the situation worse. So the arousal causes the emotion that we feel. But we still have the issue of our bodily responses being too similar to each other across different types of emotions. And so this is where the Shakhtar-Singer two-factor theory comes in. Not only do your bodily responses create an emotion, but your thoughts create them as well. So here we have an oncoming car. So we're back on 54. Shakhtar-Singer's two-factor theory basically says this. You have two different things that happen simultaneously. You have the bodily arousal, and you also have the cognitive label. So in this case, I'm afraid. Both of these work together to establish the emotion of fear. So like the James Lange theory, the two-factor theory does stipulate that emotion comes from your body sensations. But as we saw with the Cannon-Bard theory, our bodily physical reactions are far too similar to each other to be able to distinguish without some help. So our emotions also come with a cognitive label. So for example, let's say we go to a haunted house. And some of you are not going to like being in the haunted house. So what ends up happening is that some of you will get scared by a monster, you'll feel your heart pound, and you'll go, I'm afraid, and you'll be scared. On the other hand, somebody like me, I don't actually enjoy being scared, but I've developed laughter as a coping mechanism. So somebody like me goes into the haunted house, I get scared, my heart starts to pound, and I start laughing, and I go, oh, that was surprising. So instead of fear, I get the emotion of surprise. The label is what is really important here. Your bodily arousal matters, but you also need to label it because those emotions can be really similar to each other. It's part of the reason why sometimes you might have heard that if you're an anxious person and you've got all of this nervous energy running around, to kind of channel it into something else. And I certainly do that sometimes. When I'm nervous, when I'm doing theater or when I'm doing a play and I'm scared, I channel that into energy to give a really good performance. And that keeps me from being anxious. So we'll talk some more about this two-factor theory on Monday. We'll talk some more about emotions and facial expressions and body language and how all of this relates to the movie Inside Out on Monday. Don't forget that the quiz posts on Sunday. If there was a quiz last week, make sure you take it, and I will see you next time. And I'll have a study guide up for you and an exam ready for you on Monday. Everybody have a good weekend. Take care of yourselves, make good choices, don't lick doorknobs, and I'll see you later.